not to be super self-aware. That profession of my own. It'd probably be something like something in nature, like, you know, forest ranger, or I don't know, fire lookout. Like when Jack Kerouac in the Dharma Bums goes up and there's a fire lookout in those towers, and he's like alone in those places with cans of food, and it's freezing cold, and I could just see myself sitting up there and knitting. And
like what profession would you not like to do under any circumstances?
Politician.
Okay. And finally, if heaven and a higher power exist, what would you like to hear God say when you arrive at the pearly gates?
Oh, that's a hard question for me. I'm an atheist, so...
Speculate.
Good job there, buddy!
Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Nell Geisslinger. So we have some time for questions. Yeah, Ted?
I have to admit that I like MMC better than any Chekhov play.
Great.
With the exception of Seagull.
Oh.
But how did Nell inform Doll Tear Sheet, or was there a two-way conversation?
Well, I think you all know what my favorite curse word is now. And Doll Tear Sheet is, you know, she's pretty foul. And you're specifically asking about Doll Tear Sheet, though, right?
Yes. I mean, how much of that did you bring, that character, did you bring into it, action-wise, as opposed to what maybe was suggested to you?
Well, what's funny is people were so shocked that I was vomiting into a bucket, or like scratching myself, or like, you know, getting up on a table and brandishing weapons. That's kind of all suggested in the text, especially the stuff about being sick. She's like, I've drunk too many canaries. And the mistress quickly is like, you don't look so well. You've been drinking too much. I'm like, well, okay, I'll vomit into a bucket. So I mean, it was like an extrapolation, you know? And then the Falstaff has this long speech about what the different sores and pustules look like that I give people because I have STDs. And it's like, well, Lisa actually did encourage me to scratch vigorously, the director of that play. It's kind of all on the page, a lot of it, you know? I mean, so yeah, I extrapolated in my physicality on what was there, I think. Yeah.
Yes.
I was fortunate enough to hear you and Kate do the rendition of your Turducken song.
Oh, yay!
A little bit of it now, especially here.
Well, you might have noticed we had papers because we had just, it was hot off the presses. We hadn't memorized it totally. Let's see here. Why would a patron see a show like that? A show like a show like As You Like It. Why don't the patrons ever want to see a show like MMC? It's a chance to see three classics. You're getting more for what you pay. Who wouldn't want to see three classics in a turducken kind of way? And then we had some banter about what turducken is. And then at the end, it was like, the set is the biggest in the rep, 3 levels and a ton of walkways. We've got a cauldron and a fog effect. So why at intermission do they walk away? And then since you're having Mark Bedard, I'll do the last stanza, which really knocks him. What do we have to do to bring them in? Should the usher be played by John Tufts? You can't have it all, you know, and that's a fact. Ain't Mark Bedard enough?
Yes.
Who will your opposite leading men be in your next 2 shows? Patricio Frederick and Stanley Kowalski?
Well, I think it's... I don't know if it's formally been announced. Has it yet?
One has. I know both of them. Put it that way. So I don't know if it's formal, but
Well, we're among friends here. So off the record, Danforth Comins is going to play Stanley. And Ted Dacey will be playing Petruchio. Yes.
My understanding was
Fantastic.
Danforth was precast as well.
Yes,
Yeah.
Danforth was precast.
I saw another question. Someone. Yeah.
I've always wondered about acting. I've noticed that most actors are very good mimics, but there's also a lot more complexity to feeling a role in these profound perceptions. What's the interplay between mimicry and emotionality in roles? I mean, can you characterize, does it depend on the role, or is there a constant?
That is such an excellent question,
Yeah.
and
I'm
it's
writing it down.
yeah, it's a great question, and it's one that I don't know that I'm capable of like answering to your satisfaction. When you were talking about it, it made me think about, mimicry is the way that we learn to express emotion as babies, I think. And they're so intertwined to me that it's hard to know when one ends and one begins. Mimicry, the word to me implies a self-awareness because you're trying to match or emulate something that you've seen, and successful mimicry depends on being able to really match up. Acting and emoting is more subjective in that you may not be as aware of what's coming across. You try and you want to convey a certain emotion, but you can't always be aware of what the audience. If I did a Gracie Allen impersonation, I could be, if I were good at it, I could be fairly aware that I would be successful, and the audience would say, "Oh, that's Gracie Allen, and she's doing a good job." But in Stella, hopefully they would laugh, and I would be like, "Oh, I did a good job doing Gracie Allen." But with Stella, there's no immediate gratification necessarily. It's a fantastic question. I wish I had a better, more complete answer for you.
I had no expectation of the answer.
It's really blurry, those lines, though. Yeah.
Yes. Here.
So I'm kind of curious as far as writing goes. A lot of people, I always heard theater's dying forever. I don't believe it myself.
Yay!
I'm just curious as to what type of theater you hope to create. Do you see theater as changing in the next 5 years, or what are you hoping to do there?
I don't have a sense of long-term what the trajectory of theater is going to be or what could happen. I haven't given a lot of thought to that. What I hope to do is create plays that surprise people. And part of surprising an audience now, because we've seen so much, there's nothing new under the sun, and we're all familiar with style and form and different kinds of storylines. Part of what I'm interested in doing in my plays is setting up an expectation and giving an audience some familiar things to latch onto at the top of the play, and then really turning it on its head with something that comes out of the blue. I'm interested in creating plays that have sections that are totally nonverbal. I work with Daisuke Tsuji a lot in his clown shows over last year, and we've been collaborating a lot through The Imaginary Invalid, and he's sort of opened up my mind to different ways of storytelling, non-traditional forms of storytelling. I also, to me, when I go to the theater, I'm excited to see something that really shocks me. I'm also surprised, and a couple of us, Ramiz Monsef and John Tubbs, and a couple of us were sitting at the bar earlier this year talking about why isn't there more horror on stage? The genre of horror, not campy, really horror. Why doesn't The Pillow Man, we could think of, Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, the one they did here a couple of years ago, but horror, that interests me, writing a horror. Something that really because it's hard to scare people. It's hard to scare people. You can't you can't show Norman Bates sneaking up to the shower and Janet Leigh in the shower and intercut between them and build the suspense. You have to show them both on the stage at the same time. It's the way the form is. So it's how do you build suspense and still give the audience what they need to latch on? And long answer, sorry. Yeah.
You got time for one more, yeah.
I've always been kind of curious, going back to something you said about staying open to when you all of a sudden have a realization about the play, maybe
Yeah.
How does that process work, and what is the relationship with the other actors? I mean, do you ever like get in a situation where you suddenly have just an insight that would sort of change something about the interpretation of your role, but then does your mind say, I don't know if I can do that because I don't know if the people over on the other end who are going to receive this, or that may be too much. Do you edit yourself when that happens, or how do you think about it?
Sure. The answer is yes and no. It depends on the cast. In Seagull, I was working a lot with Tasso, and he was having moments like that, from what I understand, every night, and major things were changing. And from the very first moments of rehearsal, we just, as a duo, had an understanding between us, and it was not a problem. It's just people's aesthetic and the way they work, and there are some people who, if I threw them a curveball like that, would be mad. And that's fine. That's the way it is, and I try and be sensitive enough to the way people work and edit myself if I have to. Of course, not having to edit yourself is great, but then do you go down that path too far, and then you're not living up to the vision that the director set out in the beginning. So it's a balance.